Get ready for the Hustle Northwest podcast, where Oregon's dreamers, doers, and entrepreneurs share their stories. Get inspired, get motivated, and get ready to hustle. Now, here are your hosts, Brian and Carrie.
Hey, today on Hustle Northwest podcast, we have one of the founding owners of Two Towns Ciderhouse, Dave Takish. Dave grew up in Corvallis, Oregon, and developed a passion for fermentation early on, earning a Bachelor of Science degree in fermentation science and a MS in food science from Oregon State University. After working in craft brewing and on wine in the wine industry, he co-founded Two Towns Ciderhouse in 2010 with a focus on reviving traditional cider making with whole fruits and high-quality ingredients. While starting in a two-car garage, he now became one of the Northwest's largest craft brewing companies with over 100 employees, 3 production facilities, and distribution to 15 plus states. As head cider maker, Dave leads the R&D team, continuously experimenting with new ingredients, techniques to push the boundaries of cider making.
That's quite the resume.
That's an awesome
I
resume.
love it.
It's a good intro. Thank you.
Welcome.
So one thing is, like, does every cool business have to start in a garage?
I think so.
Is that the requirements? You got to
Yes.
start in a garage and work your way up to
You have
like
no shot at
Amazon
getting
and
a
junk.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. It helps if you start in a garage, loans from your grandma, those kinds of things, annoying your significant others with your business in the house and stuff,
Yeah.
those are all really good indicators that you're going to have successful.
Awesome. Well,
business.
I think it makes a well-rounded business because you got you started this with 2 other people.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Lee Larson and Aaron Sarnoff Wood, they were the geniuses that had the idea for the cider company. We had all known each other growing up. Lee was, for lack of a better word, my homebrew buddy. We had a group of us that were super into craft beer, and just so into home brewing. And
Yeah.
it wasn't ever a question on the weekend of if we were going to brew beer. It was whose house,
And
Okay.
what are we going to brew?
Yeah, and so we did all sorts of things, not just beer, but like wine and cider, and Lee and Aaron had traveled extensively in Europe. Lee lived in northern Spain for a while, and there's a strong cider culture in northern Spain actually, and England, France, Western France, where it's too cold to grow grapes, they
Sure.
grow a lot of apples. And I had kind of experienced cider in Europe as well. And Lee and Aaron, they kind of were like, well, boy, look at all these strong cider traditions in Europe. Here we are in Oregon, like the epicenter of craft beer in the
Yeah.
Pacific Northwest. There's so much good artisan wine, craft beer. How come there's no good craft
Yeah,
cider
I've noticed
here?
that. There's like
Yeah.
it's kind of come on the scene within like past 15, 20 years.
Right.
Where it wasn't there before. It's like, what do we do with all these apple trees?
Yeah. And so that was kind of the inspiration, right? Is bring craft cider back to the people. We always felt like, as huge beer fanatics, we were like, well, we're not trying to bring craft cider back to replace beer, but it deserves a seat at the table,
Yeah.
right? It has a long and storied history. It's a big part of our cultural identity. And we really lost those cider traditions, in America with Prohibition. That's really where
Okay.
we lost them. Now, leading up to Prohibition, from when, the first colonists came to America up to Prohibition, cider was the number one drink in America. Everyone made it. Everyone drank it.
Yeah.
With farming and subsistence living, cider was a part of that culture and lifestyle. Cider is actually, when you think about it, it's a way of preserving your crop, right?
Yeah.
If you don't process those apples, they're going to rot eventually. You can only eat so many apples. But if you ferment them into alcohol, alcohol is a great preservative. It makes things safe, and you can store it for a long time. And there's calories there. So, as a subsistence farmer, you don't want to let those calories go to waste. And so making hard cider out of apples has always been like a preservation technique of farm life. With prohibition, when
Yeah.
that came, right, a lot of these cider apple orchards were cut down.
Mm.
That tradition was lost. And when prohibition was repealed, you know, we you got to think, well, it only takes like one season to get grain back in the ground, right? Um, we had a lot of immigrants around that time coming from Eastern Europe with beer traditions and culture.
Yeah.
You know, also immigrants starting vineyards and stuff, and then we also had easy access to molasses, sugarcane, and rum from the Caribbean. You know, during Prohibition was the growth in you know, corn liquor, right, like bourbon,
Yeah.
right, and so we had all these great things happening, and cider was kind of lost at that time.
Yeah. Okay.
And so fast forward to, you know, 2010, and there were like, you know, one cidery was in existence at that time in
Really?
Oregon. There had been another one that I think came and went. But you know, there just cider wasn't a thing. The things on the shelf that were called cider were, you know, made with um, like a malt base. They weren't even apple base. And you know, like the classic like
Yeah.
Jolly Rancher flavoring
Yeah,
and like
yeah.
syrups and stuff. And it was always this thing on the side, like, oh, you're a weird person that doesn't like beer. Like we have this bottle under dusty bottle under the shelf, you know, for you. And we were just like, man, you know, there's got to be a place for cider.
Yeah.
And so that was 2010. You have to remember that was before Angry Orchards came out. And for better or worse, you know, Angry Orchards really introduced cider to America with some pretty big ad campaigns.
Mhm.
And so people started thinking, oh, you know, there's a few craft cideries popping up. I'm seeing ads for cider on a national scale. You know, a lot of things started happening in the cider world, and a lot of the people, especially in the Pacific Northwest, Oregon, they were looking. They said, "Well, I want to try cider, but I want to try a local cider. I want to try the good stuff," you
Yeah.
know, and that really helped us. You know, we always say we wouldn't be here without the craft beer community because
Mhm.
it was really those people who are these adventurous um, consumers, unafraid of trying crazy stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
back then that was like the height of like sour beers starting,
Mhm.
right? And you were seeing like wild ferment Riesling beers aged in oak barrels and
Yeah.
you know all sorts of crazy stuff. You know, the Abyss from Deschutes was coming out then with like, you know, like licorice and chocolate malt and like, you know, 14% beers.
Yeah.
So there was like an open table for like crazy innovative stuff.
Yeah.
And so it was the perfect time for us to come in with like, well, here's cider. You know, it's a little bit of traditional. You get that
Yeah.
nice, warm, fuzzy feels
Yeah.
of like,
Talk about it's like an apple beer.
It's
Good,
like an
yeah.
apple.
you know, pioneer life,
Yeah.
but also the thing about our company, I think, and I think Lee really had this vision, is that you know, instead of being this like farmhouse thing, and that's awesome, we wanted to make sure it fit in with the craft beer culture, right? So we were one of the first, I think, the first cider to put our cider into a can.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh.
Yeah.
I mean, even back in 2010, not a lot of breweries were going into cans.
Yeah.
I mean, some were starting, and what's funny now is like today, the expectation is that if you're going to buy a craft beer, it's going to be in a can.
Yeah.
When we started in 2010, the most popular craft beer format was a 22-ounce bomber. You remember
Yeah.
those?
Yeah.
I mean, that was like the thing. That was what craft beer came in,
Yeah.
you know?
I
And
used to buy those for you
Yeah.
too. So
Yeah.
Brian would say I was always like the Coors Light, Bud Light
Right.
sort of beer drinker, and then he started coming out with like, I'd like to go ahead and get this beer. I'm like, what is that? Like that's not a thing.
It's the
And then-
craziest logos. It's like, let me try that.
I know.
Yeah.
So I would literally go, like, if we were going someplace and we were going to get drinks or something like that, and we're taking it, I would literally go there and be like, okay, what's catching my eye? And you grab this big bottle, and I'm like, here,
Yeah.
try this
Yeah.
one. He's like, okay.
yeah, and I mean, that was the day of like, triple red IPAs
Uh-huh.
and 8%, like super bitter, and also tons of like
And
malt
thick.
body and thick.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and these huge bottles. And oh, it was great times.
Yeah.
But so that's kind of like the background, right? Is how we started, so Lee and Aaron were like, well, let's start the cider company. I joined right then in 2010 as they were kind of setting up the shop and the idea of this business.
Yeah.
And what I brought to the table was, like I had worked in the beer industry for a while. I was with Pelican Pub and Brewery
Yeah.
in Pacific City.
Mhm.
And that was back when they only had one location.
I
And
was gonna say just a little
yeah,
company. No,
uh,
they're amazing.
I really like learned the industry there.
Mhm.
And when the first year I was there as an intern, working half time in the cellar washing kegs, and the other half time they made me go do prep cook work in this kitchen. I had to cut like 50-pound bags of onions
Oh my
for the onion rings. They were really good onion rings, but that year they won Small Brewery of the Year at GABF, and then the next year they won Large Brewery of the Year. And when I was there, and so that was kind of like my diving board into the industry. I got the opportunity in grad school to start focusing on wine. I did some research and um, the effect of like non-Saccharomyces and Saccharomyces yeast on aroma compounds in Pinot Noir wine.
Mhm.
So did some sensory work, and that was really fun. And then went into the wine industry for a little bit.
Mhm.
Worked at both some really big wineries up in Central Washington and like the Prosser area, and then also worked at some artisan, small, boutique Pinot Noir wineries here in the Valley. And like I was coming off of Crush. Aaron and Lee were like, "Hey, we got this idea for a business. It's kind of crazy, but it's the cider business." And I was like, "Well, we used to make cider homebrew style." And so I kind of brought some, industry knowledge on production
Yeah.
and the quality control part of it. Lee Larson, our CEO and founder, his background is in finance, and
Okay.
he was a little kind of, let's just say, burned out, working. He'd only been working a couple years in the finance world, and he was just kind of like, this isn't, it's
Yeah.
not, I don't know if this is my thing. I mean, he was good at it, but maybe not fulfilling,
Got it.
Okay.
And Aaron's background, he went to U of O, and his background is graphic design. And he was laid off right when it was the 2008 recession.
Mhm.
So there's the heels of the recession, and he was kind of fed up with that too, and wanted to start his own business, and had a passion for brewing as well. And so it all kind
So
of
it's
came
a
together.
perfect storm. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the great thing about our company, is Lee and Aaron and I kind of um, growing this company. We all had our areas of expertise, a nice little overlap in certain areas, and it really worked. It really worked.
That's
And
awesome. And I noticed you guys, I mean, probably your experience of going from like the wine industry to the brewing industry really, I think, shows in your product lineup. It's not just where there are some companies they get fixed on just doing one type of product.
Mhm.
You guys are really experimenting with different things.
yeah, absolutely. I think funny enough, cider is really kind of halfway between beer and wine. So we like to say, we have a winery license with the TTB and the OLCC, but we have a craft brew spirit, right? All of our fermentation tanks, the techniques we use on the front end
Mhm.
for apple processing, fermentation, balance, blending, that kind of stuff. It's all kind of like in the wine world, right?
Yeah.
And the equipment we use is wine equipment. But then as soon as we get to a finished product, now we're talking about a carbonated product like beer.
Mhm.
We're not high ABV, 14% in a wine bottle. We're lower ABV, and there are some packaging implications with that. So you have to treat it more like beer,
Okay.
and people consume it like beer, right, in a pint glass. And so we really fall, like all of our packaging equipment we buy from beer manufacturers, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Beer packaging equipment. And so we really are like halfway between beer
So
and
it's like a
bourbon.
merger of
Yeah.
the wine and
Yeah.
beer into something different.
Hybrid.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's, certainly cider has a long and storied history, its own traditions, and there are, I think, the most important thing for people to take away about cider is that cider is not just one yellow, fizzy sweet thing.
Mhm.
That's what most people think about when they
Yeah.
think of cider, and it is, in fact, that New World modern style is mostly what is sold and consumed in the U.S. Um, but that would be like saying that all beer is like Budweiser,
Yeah.
right? When we know there's things like imperial stouts and
Yeah.
doppelbocks and all sorts of there's this wide range of beers, and it's the same thing with cider styles. um at these cider competitions and stuff, there are a lot of different categories, just like in beer. And that ranges from these traditional styles, as per like northern Spain. It's a called
Oh, really?
natural cider style,
Okay.
and it's very, very different than what they do in Western France.
Oh.
In Western France, they're growing, they make a French style cider. And well, what does that mean, right? Well, the number one thing is they're using French apple varieties. Um, there are a lot of apple varieties out there. Most people can probably name six,
I was
maybe.
gonna say I can think of like 5 or 6
Yeah.
off
Yeah.
the top of my
Right?
head.
If you happen to have like a Whole Foods or market of choice in your area, you might be privy to more like 12 apple varieties. Um, at the Germplasm Repository in Ithaca, New York, I think they have about 7,000 varieties on catalog.
Wow.
And
7,000?
yeah, and that's just the tip of the iceberg.
And that consists of the varieties consist of like growth time, how big they get, the taste. Is that what the difference is, or is there just like that many slightly variations, and then all of a sudden you have a new variety?
Okay. Well, we can get into apple varieties. It's actually a really fun topic, and I promise I
I
won't
was like,
make
when
it.
did you start
I-
knowing so much about
I
apples?
promise I won't make it boring. Okay, here's the deal. Here's the crazy thing. For an apple tree to grow fruit, right? Those blossoms need to be fertilized in the spring, right? We are about maybe like 3 weeks away from the first apples blossoming right now. I'm hoping the weather.
I was gonna
gets
say,
better.
do you guys get excited this
Yeah.
time of year?
Yeah, we do. But it's also nerve wracking
Yeah.
because so the last average frost date in the Willamette Valley, I think, is April 20th.
Okay.
And that is also the same date that most apples kind of average bloom.
Oh, no
And
pressure
so,
there.
so yeah, so like that's why, when you hear about
Feels like it hasn't been
farmers,
that bad of a year so
yeah,
far.
no, it's been a pretty okay year. And,
okay.
and
He's like, don't jinx it.
yeah,
Like,
to be honest, apple trees don't care about freezing in the winter when they're dormant.
Yeah.
It's the blooming when the blossoms
It's most
open,
delicate.
then it's like
Okay.
very sensitive time, and they need good weather for the pollinator insects to come
Yeah.
in. But the thing is right, as a tree is gonna, let's say you got a Granny Smith tree, right? Granny Smith tree. The blossoms open up, and you have to get pollen from a different variety of apple in on that blossom to fertilize it. Apple trees are not self-fertile.
Hmm.
Okay? So you can't take pollen from another part of the tree. You have to have pollen from a different tree of a different variety.
Okay.
Okay? And when that pollen hits the flower and fertilizes it, then you get fruit set, and now you're starting to grow an apple. Okay? If that flower never gets pollen, then it'll just die and you won't have any fruit.
How long does it take an apple to actually grow?
The whole season from spring to fall.
Okay.
Yeah, so most of the summer.
Okay.
Um,
I did not know that,
but
actually.
yeah, there you go. So the thing is, so now you're growing an apple on your Granny Smith tree, and what kind of apple are you growing? Well, obviously you're growing a Granny Smith apple. No matter what other pollen comes in, you've got a Granny Smith
Yeah.
tree. You're growing a Granny Smith
Yeah.
apple. But the seeds inside of that apple are going to be a hybrid between the parent tree and the parent pollinator.
Okay.
Oh,
Because
okay.
remember we said that you have to have pollen from a different variety.
Yeah.
So every single time an apple blossom is pollinated and you grow fruit, the seeds inside are going to be a hybrid.
And you don't know what it could be.
Well, what it is a new variety.
Wow.
Every single
So
time.
every single time.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's just like people.
Yeah.
It's, just,
No, it is, right?
it's
It
like
is.
its own unique thumbprint.
And here's the thing, right? I'm really glad you brought up the people analogy here because so parents, they have a kid, right?
Mhm.
And then let's say that child sometimes looks a heck of a lot like the mother's side,
Yeah.
right? Sometimes it looks a lot like the father's side, and sometimes it looks like, oh well, you look like your great grandpa Joe, right? Who had like blonde hair, but nobody else in the family had blonde hair.
Yeah.
And then you might have those two parents might have another child, and sometimes two brothers can almost look like twins,
Uh-huh.
and sometimes two brothers, one will be 5'6" and the other one will be 6'6".
They look like they're not even from the same family. Yeah.
And that's just the shakeup of the dice about how the genetics combine and which ones are expressed, and it's the same with apples.
Okay. So these apples that are hybrid could also, when they grow into a tree, could be a different type of tree, maybe more resilient through like seasons or something like that.
Exactly,
So
right.
it's nature kind of
Yeah.
progressing and
Right.
upgrading itself.
Yeah. And so what we think of is, let's go back to maybe like the 1800s in England, right? And so we've got Farmer Brown, and he's got his apple orchard, and an apple falls off the tree and rolls to the fence line, right, where the sheep can't get it, right? And it starts growing, and then you might stumble upon this. They call them chance seedlings or pippins, or and there's this new tree growing from seed, right?
Yeah.
And the farmer will be like, oh, well, hey, look, now 7 years later, it's starting to fruit, and that apple, it looks a little bit like the apple I have in my orchard, but it blooms earlier, or it's sweeter, or it's more red,
Oh, okay.
or any number of things. It crops heavier, or
Yeah.
it's has a different flavor profile. And if that farmer wants that apple variety, all he has to do is take a cutting and graft it into his orchard. And so apple varieties are propagated through grafting,
Mm.
not through seed. Because anytime you plant a seed, it won't be true to type. We already said it's going to be a
Yeah.
hybrid, right? Now we're going to circle back, right? Here's the crazy thing. Okay, so now you graft, and now you have an orchard full of this new variety. Well, they're all genetically identical, right? Because there was the one
Mhm.
mother tree that you started taking cuttings from.
Yeah.
And now you propagated it through your orchard. And you've got this new variety, and maybe it's called Farmer Brown's variety because he found it growing, right? And that's why we say, like, when you have two Granny Smith trees side by side, they can't pollinate each other because it's the same tree.
Mhm.
They are genetically the same, right?
So, yeah.
And so all Granny Smith trees are the same. And we said apple trees are not self-fertile, so therefore you need pollen from different varieties, right? And what makes it like a real variety? Well, you can imagine in the 1800s, Farmer Brown's got this new variety that's sweeter. It blooms early to market earlier. It's more disease resistant. And the farmer next door says, "Oh, hey, I really want Farmer Brown's variety." So he goes and takes a cutting, puts it in his orchard. Pretty soon, 50 years later, you have a variety that's endemic to a region. And now we would say that is Farmer Brown's apple variety. It was discovered in 1825. And, it's an English variety because it was found growing in England. So, back to France, when we were talking about French apple varieties,
Yeah.
it's because those are the ones they selected for their purposes in Western France to make their cider. And it makes like their apples tend to be very low in acid, very high in tannin content,
Okay.
very fruity, and they have these apples, and then they have their own production styles, right? Their fermentation techniques, which kind of shift flavor profiles. And now we've got this thing that is French cider, and that is entirely different than the cider they make in northern Spain, because those are Spanish varieties and they have their own fermentation techniques. And here in the United States, we make a lot of New World modern cider.
Kind of like the Cosmic Crisp.
Exactly. Yeah, there you go.
Nice
you're
segue
you're
there.
Johnny on the spot. Oh my gosh. So we've got this really cool apple variety right now that was bred by Washington State University called the Cosmic Crisp, and its parents are the Honeycrisp apple, and a different one called Enterprise that's a little less well known, and very popular in home orchards because it's super disease resistant. And so they did this hybrid, and Honeycrisp apples usually are kind of streaky. They're like green and red. Enterprise apples are just like dark red, almost purple.
Oh, wow.
And they're the flesh inside is like snow white. And so when you look at the Cosmic Crisp apple, you can totally see like it's got traits from both parents, right?
Really dark and swirly or something?
It's a really dark red apple. It's big like a Honeycrisp, and it has that crunch like a Honeycrisp, but it's got a lot more flavor and acid content. So that comes from the Enterprise side. And we not only is it just a really great apple for eating because it is so crunchy and it's got a little bit more kick than a Honeycrisp, but the flavor is really great. And I am very excited that the Washington State Apple Growers Association and decided to pick this, because I think for a long time people focus too much on aesthetics and how the apple looks. But this apple really, one of the main reasons they selected it is the flavor. It's so good. It is so good. And that translates through to the cider as well. So we there's a lot of sugar in that apple, a lot of acid, and a lot of flavor. And we can make, it really fits in our New World modern style of cider, which is fruit forward, clean, bubbly, well balanced, crisp. But it's what you think of when you think about when someone says hard cider. You think of pouring that golden nectar into a glass, and it's bubbly and very apple, a lot of clean fruit apple characteristics. If you were to try like a French cider or my God, a Spanish cider, you would be like, what is this? Is this even cider? The French ciders tend to have dark brown sugar notes. The Spanish ciders, they have strong vinegar characteristics.
More like a port almost?
No, the closest thing would be like if you've ever had like wild fermented beer, that kind of stuff, or like pet nat wine, like Spanish cider had people describe it as like olive brine and like lemon peel. It's kind of got this salinity. It's very funky. That's a good.
Those are very specific tastes.
Yeah. Very funky. So like a lot of bacterial qualities. They are natural, wild, rustic kind of ciders, and very different than when we talk about like clean, crisp, fruit forward.
That's what the Cosmic Crisp is kind of like your flagship.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And so, for the Cosmic Crisp, we really lean into that like clean profile, that acid driven profile.
Have you won any awards on that?
We actually have.
Really?
Yeah.
I noticed some awards here on the table.
Maybe one or two.
Okay. In 2024, we had a great year on the award circuit. And thanks in part to Cosmic Crisp, but we also make some of those like French style ciders too, and just like for fun, like those are we love dabbling and all sorts of things. And so the big one that we won this year, well, there's a couple of them, but the Great American Beer Festival in Colorado. This one right here. We won.
Yeah,
Cider
like a stone on there too. Like it's actual. Oh wow, that's cool.
And so this was 2024 was the first year ever that this very prestigious beer festival allowed cider in the competition. So it's its own category,
Okay.
and its own like sub part of the competition. And yeah, we won. We won a number of medals, and then they tally up those points. And
Is it one of these?
Cidery of the Year.
You got a couple of them
Yeah,
there.
I think here we go. Yeah, this is.
You have the metal on it and
Yep.
everything?
So this actually is our French style cider.
Oh,
We
okay.
call it Cidre Boucher. There you go.
I won't take it from you, don't worry.
And
I don't want
so this guy we entered along with some of our Cosmic Crisp, and this was in the traditional cider category, whereas our Cosmic Crisp is in like the modern cider category.
Can someone buy that style?
Yes, this is available online and in our tap room,
Mhm.
and select, like
And your tap room is located in Corvallis.
it is,
Yep.
yeah. And then like also select, bottle shops that specialize in, craft beer and that kind of thing.
Some of like the liquor stores carry that, like the big mega ones, they carry that, or is there like certain other shops that carry that?
No, it's more like specialty boutique, like a place you'd go for those like wild sour beers or something.
Yeah,
Like
okay.
if you've got kind of like a craft beer centric shop,
Yeah.
this would be in one of those. But the Cosmic Crisp we put into cans, and we put those in a 6-pack, and those are available at grocery stores.
Okay.
So this is more like the specialty thing, and the Cosmic Crisp is like our grocery store flagship, like you said.
And what do you have on tap? I mean, I notice like every restaurant or any place I go into, there's always, it seems like the Two Towns is on tap.
Oh,
What is like your go-to that people like gravitate towards
yeah.
for the tap?
Our like kind of tried and true tap draft cider has been our Pacific Pineapple.
Mhm.
That's a good one.
We've had
Yeah.
that for a while, and we were a little, when we went into that pineapple cider thing. We had seen it done kind of not that great by other people. But we were like, yeah, I mean, tropical fruit. I mean, it's very popular right now, and it's a very pleasant, profile. Everyone loves pineapple, but we wanted to do it right,
Yeah.
and so part of Two Towns is we don't use like flavorings, like artificial or natural like flavor
Mhm.
in our ciders. We really drive our flavor profiles through our fermentation techniques and practices,
Mm.
and the quality of the ingredients we source. That's like always kind of um, what we go back to. I don't know. My dad has this saying, and I don't know why he says it. He's from New York originally, but it's this folksy saying where you can't make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. And
You
so
gotta say it in a New York accent.
I don't know where that came
Yeah.
from, but it like stuck in my head. And it's like you can't make a exceptional product out of subpar ingredients. You need to source the good stuff. So that's how we came to the table. That's how we always come to the table, but that's how we came to the table for our pineapple cider. We said we need to get the best, not from concentrate, because we don't use concentrates,
Yeah.
pineapple juice that we can. So we started, and that's my job, my role at Two Towns as head cider maker is we oversee research and development and creation of new stuff. And
How many new flavors do you have? Like currently, if someone were to go on your site, what are you guys at right now? 30?
well,
More?
you know what's funny is I actually took a list. I have this like list for technical details of past historical ciders we've
Yeah.
done. And I just looked at that list the other day, and it's not comprehensive because I only started it in like 2015 or something.
Yeah.
But we're well over 100 different ciders that we've made over the years. Now, most of those are retired. They were seasonals or
Yeah.
limited release.
Because you do have anniversary ciders.
We do.
Yeah.
We do. We make one of those a year. But like right now, like we basically have half a dozen flagship ciders
Mhm.
that are available year round. We have a seasonal rotator that comes through, so it changes every season. And then we have a limited release line, and that's like we get to do whatever we want, super fun stuff.
You had a bourbon barrel aged one
We
that I love. That
yeah.
was good.
I love that one.
We haven't done a bourbon barrel one in a while, but those like everyone loves bourbon, and so bourbon barrel cider, it works too because it's like that caramel apple kind of
Mhm.
like
What's the ABV on something like
profile.
that? That was a 2 ticket one, by the way,
Yeah.
when I went to go last year, so I knew it was a little bit higher.
We so I think the one you're talking about is actually we used single malt whiskey barrels from Westward Whiskey. It was a collaboration with a Westward
They're out of
Whiskey.
Oregon too, right?
Yep, they're in Portland. And we did this super fun thing where so they take a new oak barrel and they put their new make, like the unaged whiskey spirit, into that barrel, and they'll age it for a couple years. Then they take that whiskey out of the barrel
Mhm.
and they send the barrel to us, and we put our bad apple cider, which is already 10.5%, but then we put it in the barrel and it actually like jumps up another 1% alcohol just from the residual whiskey that's in
Really?
the barrel. And
The angel share kind of or is like
it,
it's like in the wood.
it's in the wood. It's
Yeah,
in the wood.
pulling back
Yep,
out.
yep, it's in the wood. And the angel share is actually what evaporates into the
Okay.
atmosphere. So if you have a barrel of whiskey for a decade aging,
Yeah.
it's not. It'll start full, but it doesn't. After 10 years, there's like room in the barrel because it's
It's
evaporated.
evaporated.
Yeah.
Okay.
They call that the angel share. But so we put our cider into these whiskey barrels, and it picks up the flavor of the whiskey.
Yeah.
But what also is happening is our cider is going into the pores of the wood, and imbuing the wood with cider like
It makes it more complex.
character.
I think. Yeah.
And so then we'll take our cider out of the barrel and we'll package it as a, whiskey barrel cider. Um, and then we send the barrel back to Westward Whiskey. And they put their whiskey back in that barrel for a cider finish whiskey.
Well, look at you guys.
That full
The
circle
full
there.
circle.
Yeah.
And then they send it back to you after they're done, and then it just
Yeah.
Like, it's your turn. It's
we
our
haven't.
turn.
Yeah. I don't think we've done it subsequent years.
Yeah.
But it's
it'd be interesting to
it's
have
not
the
the
two
same.
glasses together. Like
Yeah.
here's the cider version, here's the whiskey version.
Yeah, no, and it's cool because you get totally the same notes. You're like, oh yeah, well, like this is a whiskey, but there's just this like little bit of sweet apple fruitiness, a little bit of the cider that we actually put in our bad apple, which is this is the most iconic cider that we've made over the years. It was two ciders that we founded the company with. Our bright cider.
And there's a green one. There's a green label. That's the
bright cider.
Bright cider. Okay.
And that's like normal kind of cider strength at 6%. And this one is 10.5% because we ferment it with a little bit of local meadow foam honey.
Mm.
And so that barrel actually picks up some of those honey notes too. And when they put the whiskey in there, right, you get this like finished whiskey it's clearly whiskey, but there's these notes on the edges, of that cider and honey and caramel kind of notes. And then when you try the bad apple cider that has been in those whiskey barrels, you get that like wonderful like oak barrel spiritus note on it too. So it's a really fun like little collaboration that we're doing.
Well, you guys are doing amazing work, and I mean, it's amazing that you can take a company from a 3 guys
In a garage.
to how many employees you guys have now?
Well over 100.
Wow.
I think it kind of depends on the day, but probably we're about 120, 130 now.
And you guys are one of the biggest beverage distributors in Oregon, at least.
Well, we are one of the larger like alcoholic beverage producers in Oregon, and then there also is on a national scale we're the number 2 cidery now.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah,
I love automation and thought it was really cool that you guys integrated robots into your integrated robots into your production. And we talked to Matt Dickinson over at the Harvest Party, and this is what he had to say about how robots are working inside your facility.
So the robots that we have now are for palletizing or depalletizing. They either take stuff off the line and put it onto a pallet ready to ship onto a truck, or on our variety packing line, we have 2 robots that actually take loose cans off of a pallet and then put them back onto the conveyor, and then they are repackaged into whatever format that happens to be, whether it's a 12-pack variety pack or an 18, or even with our Craftwell line, we have an 8-pack variety pack on that. So it's range of things that we do with that, but the robots mostly help with that because humans to do that job is tough. It's super repetitious. It's, you know, you get a lot of that, causes a lot of injury potentially, just for tendons and stuff. I know that, you know, I've been in the game for about 17 years now, and I kind of feel it. But yeah, it's nice to have that like reliability. Basically, we can have the folks that normally did that job, you know, it gives them a chance to learn more, to do more, and we can kind of elevate everybody that's already there. We're not like using robots to replace people. It's more like we're just changing the game and just trying to elevate what we can do as a company as a whole. You know, it's incredible from when I even started at Two Towns 11 years ago, what was even possible. The robots that we have now weren't really on anybody's radar. It's like, oh, you have to have a, you know, $1 billion facility to even entertain the thought, and now we're actually having them. It's quite the jump in the technology span. So I only expect it to get more and more, especially as AI becomes a more of a thing and the robots can become smarter. The variety packing robots that we do actually use AI cameras to determine where the cans and flats are on the pallet, and then it decides how to pick based on what the computer tells it. That's the reason why we did this. Variety packing is a huge portion of our business, and we kind of see the writing on the wall for this, you know, continuing to be like the largest growing portion or one of the largest growing portions. So it's the way that we can keep up with the demand that's already there, but with scaling in mind. We actually have plans to put in another depalletizing robot on our VP line. So it would really only take 1 to 2 people to run what usually took a 6-person operation. But innovation's the name of the game, especially now with you know, trends kind of changing faster than they have in the past. So being able to keep up with that, and then to, you know, change through any one of our, you know, it depends on what lines between Craftwell and Cider, and we still run some seltzer. You know, I would say, I can't think of the number right off the top of my head, but at least around 25 different varieties a year, give or take. And that's quite a lot to go through for, you know, releases every month, every quarter, depending on what it is. Usually in the spring and fall, we see the most change up of the lineup. But the core group is probably, I think, 16, 17 different SKUs that we run. And then, you know, probably almost 10 more for seasonal and specialty releases above that and beyond that.
Did you guys ever picture it was going to be this big?
Oh,
No.
we've had so many business plans that like I think Lee was saying the other day, he, you know, he found like a binder of like some of our original business
Everybody
plans
has things like little notes.
you know,
of,
in
like,
his garage, in the attic or something. And he just said he was laughing so hard because it's like, it was his plan, but you know, now looking back, he's like, whoa, we've learned a lot. And you know,
he's looking through, he's like, oh, that's cute.
Someone in
Yeah.
10 years now, they're going to have this notebook like, this is the founder's notebook.
yeah.
Have some secret recipe
Right.
right in the back.
Yeah.
I'll be like, what?
Yeah. Yeah. What I actually just recently, so now that it's our 15-year anniversary, we're doing for this year like a throwback series where we're just kind of doing some of the old ciders that we kind of started out with. And one of them was Sun's Out Saison, which is a peach cider that's fermented with a Saison yeast. And me and the team were like, oh, hey, we got to make that again. And we had one of those. We were like, this is the recipe. Like, we're looking at the thing. We were like, how many drums of peach puree are we fermenting? Like, I mean, it just like doesn't even make sense.
Like, were we drinking before we
Yeah.
came up with this recipe?
We actually had to do like a pilot, like a small scale fermentation, just to prove to ourselves that it really was correct. Because I was like, there's no way we did that. Did we really do that? You know, like, and yeah, sure enough, that's what we used to. That's what we used to do. So you know, yeah, we definitely have those moments.
And you guys have an anniversary coming up, and you guys celebrate in October.
Yeah, at our
Your
harvest party.
Your harvest party.
Party is amazing.
So-
So I love that the harvest party has become such a huge community event for you guys. While we were there, we actually spoke to your marketing director, Danielle, and here's what she said about the harvest party.
This is our 14th annual harvest party here at Two Towns, and it began the year we started our business, which was 2010. And we've had it every year since. Yeah, well, this party has certainly grown over the years, but right now we are expecting over 3,500 attendees. It's Corvallis' biggest party of the year. We serve over 40 ciders and other craft beverages on tap. There's multiple bands, DJ, there's multiple food trucks, there's games, there's prizes. We even have a hot air balloon that is giving balloon rides today. It is a Cosmic Crisp hot air balloon, and we partner with Cosmic Crisp in a number of our flagship ciders. This is a party that is a event that is full of gratitude and thankfulness for our community that has allowed us to thrive as well as we have as a company. So every year we partner with a nonprofit organization, and they're our benefactor for the party, and all of the net proceeds go to that organization. This year it's Cornerstone Community Housing. They're based out of Eugene. They're focused on housing and security in our community. I think this is a great event for the Corvallis community. There are many people who have been here repeatedly over the years. There are many first timers. I think it's a great opportunity for them to come out and celebrate with friends and family and enjoy all of the various beverages and food that we have to offer. We find that our target audience for cider is gender neutral, so we find that both male and female genders enjoy our cider equally. We also find that we are generational, we span the generations. So we see both baby boomers enjoying cider with their millennial children, and so that we span all the generations with our products. How we stay ahead of the game in terms of innovation, we know that cider drinkers or drinkers in general these days are not, they're not allegiant to one specific category. So what they're really looking for is flavor innovation. So how we stay ahead of the game is that we are dedicated to innovative flavor profiles, innovative tastes, and craft beverages. So we make those to be attractive to our target audience. Yeah, we've seen a huge growth in the population of people who are either taking a break or slowing down or not drinking in general, and so we've released non-alcoholic hard cider, a line called Sidekick, and that is de-alkalized hard cider. So we actually put the alcohol in, and then we remove it and have, as a result, non-alcoholic hard cider. Our NA Sidekick line is award-winning, and we have them at every single bar here today, free of charge for anybody who is driving, who is not drinking for any reason, or who needs to take a break.
One of the amazing things about the harvest party that you guys put on is there's a goal behind it. And we spoke with Darcy Phillips, who is the executive director of Cornerstone Community Housing, which was the 2024 benefactor of the harvest party, and this is what she said.
Yeah, so Cornerstone Community Housing, we are a 501c3 nonprofit. We're based out of Eugene, Oregon, but we do work across the state of Oregon. We have two sides of work that we do. We're an affordable housing developer, so we build, own, and maintain affordable housing. And then we also provide resident services for folks that live in affordable housing. And we do that work across the state, and it could look like food and nutrition, kids programs, health and wellness. We do programs called Get Motivated, which are essentially field trips for seniors who are aging in place, getting them out of their homes, and it might look like a trip to the blueberry farm or antiquing, or we play a lot of bingo. Our seniors love bingo. So it's really about meeting residents where they're at, linking arms with them, and helping them walk their journey. Well, first off, this party is outstanding. We're having a lot of fun. We're really lucky to have been selected by Two Towns, and we're grateful for the support. Everyone has been really generous. We've gotten the opportunity to share all about what Cornerstone is doing locally and across the state, and gosh, we're having a blast. Yeah, so events like this are really important. As a nonprofit, we do depend on donations from individual donors and organizations and businesses like Two Towns who step up and really put their money where their mouth is to support their community. We work locally here in Corvallis to provide resident services, and then also, as I mentioned, across the state. And these types of events and the donations that we bring in, they really help us continue the work, especially around the resident services, to make sure that we are able to help people find what they need to really build a foundation to thrive. And it's really a way to help prevent homelessness before it even begins for folks.
It's awesome. We had a good time last year, and he brought food trucks out to kind of help complement it.
Yeah, and it's
bands.
grown.
Yeah.
It's actually grown a lot because now we've got, it's almost like this street fair. But what we do is we save every single cider that we have made for the previous year, and we put them all on tap at once. And so it's kind of like its own brew fest, you know, where
Yeah.
you get tokens and you walk around and can try all these different beers, except it's just all ciders that we've made. So if you missed one of our limited releases, or you missed, you know, a seasonal or one of the specialty ones that came out in the tap room only, like they're all on tap there at the festival, and you can go find it and taste it if you want. I mean, there's dozens of, you know,
You guys have your own
food
balloon.
carts.
You guys have your own balloon.
Well, it's the Cosmic Crisp Apple brand balloon.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a hot air balloon.
You know, you
and-
made it when you get your own balloon.
Yeah, it's eye catching. That is for
Yeah.
sure. So we have the hot air balloon, and then we have a bunch of local bands that come. So there's music and you know, hay bales to sit on, and you know, sometimes like the, you know, Civil War game will be on or something, and we'll throw that on.
It's like going to a pumpkin patch for adults.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
with
awesome.
like a lot more alcoholic drinks.
Everybody's smiling.
Yeah. And this last year, the one you guys were at, I don't know if you stayed late, but the last band of the night was DJ D-Man. And, you know, myself and a number of other of us were like looking at the band list. Oh, yeah, this is cool. And I was like, who's DJ D-Man, you know? And it's like, oh, yeah, it's Daniel from, like, you know, accounting, like, you know, like
Oh, okay.
the accounting department.
You never saw that
And
happen.
we're like, oh, and like he killed it. He brought the house down. Like
Wow.
everyone was dancing, and so that was pretty cool that we had one of our own employees performing. But he rocked. Like it was a dance party.
You're like, where has this been? all
yeah,
this
I know.
time?
Everyone was like, what? So
Come Monday morning, he's
I-
like, back to accounting.
I believe DJ D-Man is making a reappearance at next year's or this year's harvest party.
All right.
But yeah, so like basically, it usually starts midday and goes till like 9 o'clock or something. And, you know, we have tents up because it is October when it happens. And so it may or may not rain, and you gotta, you know, wear your wellies and, you know, bring a rain jacket or whatever. But like there's hot food, there's bands, there's the hot air balloon, and there's like every single cider that we've made on tap. Plus, you know, we have some of our sales guys who like squirrel away something, you know, really special from like 5 years ago or something, and they'll bring that out and we'll put that on tap. We get buddy I grew up with, his dad grows giant pumpkins. He's a farmer, but one of his side things he does is grow giant pumpkins. We have giant pumpkins there, and we'll like serve cider out of the giant pumpkins. And I mean, it's just a hoot. And yeah, if you're interested in trying a wide variety of ciders of all different styles and kinds, like it's the place to be.
Well, we'll definitely remind people as it's getting closer to October,
Yeah.
and show your stuff. But you guys, you can find, you can order your stuff on your website.
Yeah.
Locally, like people can go and order it, and how they ship it.
Yeah, so cider kind of like falls under like a greater umbrella for regulatory purposes as like a wine.
Okay.
And in fact, as just like a weird side note, that's why you may find nutrition panels on some of our ciders, and some of our ciders they won't have nutrition panels. A lot of people
Oh.
ask about that,
Yeah.
and it's because Under 7%, we're regulated by the FDA, and it needs a nutrition panel. And over 7% alcohol, we're technically just a wine, like a fruit wine.
So if I drink something over 7%, I don't have to look at the label and kind
Like
of
look at the calories.
Actually, the calories don't count if you're over 7%. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I'll just do that.
Yeah. No, I mean, just like, have you ever seen a nutrition panel on a bottle of wine?
No, I don't want to.
It's because right, nobody does. And so anyway, so like, we it's weird. We kind of fall into, we're governed by two different regulatory bodies depending on the alcohol percentage. But the point of that was just that, like generally we fall under the wine umbrella. So we can ship our cider online to most states, but each state has their own regulations when it comes to like shipping alcohol and especially wine. So there are like random states that just for some reason like the regulations aren't set up. Like I don't think we can ship to Arkansas, but we could ship to like Minnesota or like we might not. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here, but we might not be able to ship to Rhode Island, but we can to New York or something like that.
Okay,
so
cool. Well, Dave, thanks for coming out. I learned so much about apples today. I had no idea. So, I mean,
we
feel like I could do it now.
Whole other podcast just on apples. I mean,
you could cover apples just on a single podcast, and that's your whole podcast is about apples.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
Yeah, no, it's funny. In terms of like just cider, I mean, it's such a fun thing, and it's something like everyone knows what it is, but I think we're like we all know what apples are and stuff, but we're so familiar with them, but at the same time people don't know a lot about like how fun apples are and all the different varieties out there. And I can tell you that these old antique heirloom apples and some of the newer breeded varieties, they are really different than what you find in the store. I mean, there's one of my favorites is called Ashmead's Kernel, and it's from like the late 1700s, and it tastes like it's got notes of like if you've ever had like a pear jelly belly, like that pear candy, like they taste like
that, like crisp
pear candy, like juicy pear.
Okay.
Other ones.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, there's some weird names too. One of my favorites is Harry Master's Jersey. That's a fun one. Sheep's Nose, Lady Fingers, Slack McGirdle. That's another one.
Pass me the Slack McGirdle.
How about this one? Finkenwerner Herbs Prince. Those are all real, like no joke.
These are from the old world, or these are like new stuff.
Most of those are English varieties. I think Finkenwerner Herbs.
I mean, that's what they do. They just make up words.
Finkenwerner Herbs Prince is like from Austria or something. There's just like it's like this wild world of apples, and I encourage anyone out there to like get into it because there's so much more than like just Granny Smith.
Just the 5 that you think of when you go to the store.
Awesome. Well, Dave, thanks for coming out again. Guys, check out Two Towns Cider. They got an awesome Instagram page too. They share a lot of their cider making and tons of things about apples on there too, I'm sure. So,
well, thanks for having me. It's been a real blast.
All right, thank you.